My dear conquering community, welcome to another episode. Now I'm here with Jorge Cantero. Welcome, how are you, my friend?
Thank you, I'm glad to be here.
Same here. I know it was quite a journey with the traffic in Mexico City, but we're here.
It's ridiculous since I'm from nearby.
Oh, really?
Yes, I come from Satellite.
Well, it's just that here in Polanco, it's always a topic.
Driving around here takes more time than getting here.
Well, but we're already here at Carajillo. We're going to invite you for a little Carajillo. Let's relax and chat.
Phenomenal.
Does that sound good to you?
That sounds good to me.
Hey, thanks for your book called Being a Man, Masculinity as a Defense of Goodness and Life Beyond Obsolete Customs and Sterile Modernities. I like it. That's what I want to talk about today because it seems like we still haven't found a meaning that we can normalize or internalize about what masculinity is, what it means to be a man. We can start there. Sound good to you?
Of course.
Why did you decide to write about this?
Because modernity demands it, because the times ask for it, Johnny. I mean, honestly, they've been asking us for it for a long time. We men haven't given I'll put it this way, a bang on the table to raise our hand afterward and say, this is our place in the world. We've allowed a whole variety of different things to tell us that for a long time, it was the imperative needs of survival, which then exerted pressure on evolution, and later it was the needs of civilization and culture. In recent times, it's been more feminist positions, which is not a bad thing. That is, I believe that vital, healthy feminism is important because there are two types of feminism. Without a doubt, there are many types of feminism, but broadly speaking, there are at least two. One is vital, one is symptomatic, one seeks conciliation, reconciliation for all of us to be equal. And another one that is very angry,
very radicalized.
Very angry, he's very angry, and now he's just looking for someone to take it out on, right? And someone else ends up paying for it. A whole variety of different characters, among them, of course, the man. Well, not that one, but vital feminism, of course, also started trying to tell us which way things were going. This is what's expected of you. But I think it took men a long time to raise their hand and say, it's that we have to define ourselves. Because we feel what it is to be a man, we live what it is to be a man, we act like men, but we haven't taken on that task. We have been busy or distracted with other topics, and recently also some very radicalized and very angry, without proposing anything either. I mean, just complaining, but not proposing anything either, and others fading away and not proposing anything either.
I mean, let's see if I understand those nuances. One is the one who seeks a healthy masculinity, another could be the famous macho man, and another is the princeso.
We could say,
they are like the nuances.
We could say it. The term princeso, as I understand, is interesting and quite trendy in this.
It's the one that's understood today?
Look, I call that character a non-man postmodern.
Okay.
It sounds complicated, but it's not. I'm talking about the man who is very sensitive, very emotional, very ecological, very in touch with the world, and has no desire to bother anyone.
Okay.
And therefore he became harmless, but even worse, he remained childish.
Okay.
He basically stayed a child. He relates to the world by suppressing his adulthood, his masculinity. He cancels it out as if the world told him being masculine is wrong, so you have to suppress it, and that's where he stayed. What can a man do if he doesn't develop masculinity? To remain a child.
To remain a child?
To stay little.
Is that the same as what they also call being castrated? Is it like this person who lost that power or who gave up in their relationship? Who said, I can't take this anymore, or not?
Look, I'm a psychoanalyst, so I'm not unfamiliar with the term castration. For psychoanalysis, it's fundamental in our theories and so on. I wouldn't say he's the castrated one, because castration would imply an act of elimination, let's say, in a radical, violent way, of the phallus.
Okay.
The phallus in the psyche is like indeed power, but it's also very closely linked to the penis. I wouldn't call it castrated because I wouldn't want to go there. I would rather call it annulled, impoverished, diminished, extremely juvenile. And there's also a very important point, extremely individualistic. The postmodern name, in fact, is extremely individualistic. And there's a reason for that. I mean, masculinity, as I see it, is a relational system. In other words, masculinity doesn't make any sense. Its presence, let's say, in the male body, if it's not meant to establish a relationship.
Okay?
The man, through masculinity, relates to the world, to other men, to children, to women, of course, and to his environment. It's a relational phenomenon that allows you to fulfill your role from a turbocharged individualism. You're not interested in having a prosperous relationship with the world. You shut yourself in, you're isolated, you withdraw, and to hell with it. So, these two characters, the postmodern non-man and the macho, have no desire to have a relationship.
Okay?
The macho only wants to have it on his own terms. The macho is an individual who doesn't care about women, who doesn't care about other men, who doesn't experience genuine desire, genuine love for these people, and locks himself in his own bubble where he wants to hold all the power and control.
We could say that this is more about survival, like this person who is on autopilot and also can't connect with others. That's why, because he goes out to hunt the world, but not to connect and not to create harmony.
That's interesting what you just said, to hunt the world. Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think so too. At the end of the day, for you to have a male, this is something I've repeated many times on this journey, you have to destroy an innocent child. I mean, no one is born a macho, right? No one. You might be born with a predisposition to be more competitive, more aggressive, more extroverted, but what we call macho, no one is born that way. You have to destroy an innocent child, shame him to his core, leave him with no options, take him away from all sensitivity, from all sense of aesthetics. But then, this is where it takes shape. You offer him a hand. I mean, the group has to offer him a hand and say, but there is an alternative for us to stop messing with you, and that's for you to become macho like us. Join the club. And then, at that point, this wounded child has an option. So that means I survive. Like you said, I survive if I become like you. I stop feeling ashamed, I stop feeling small, and I find community. Yes, a disgusting community, but a community nonetheless. A community that doesn't want to relate to anyone except power. Of course.
And what does that look like in reality? Is it the famous bullying so I don't get bullied?
For example.
Or do I talk about sex in a misogynistic way because at the table they laugh at me if I talk about more balanced things?
Of course.
Okay?
Nonsense wordplay. Parents who abuse and mistreat their children. Take off my boots, sissy.
Don't be a sissy, don't cry.
Of course. And that's how it is, right? The male initiation is taking you to the strip club, taking you to prostitutes. It's all this consistent objectification of the other.
Okay.
Machismo is this continuous objectification of the other, where the other person can't be seen as anything but a thing to be used.
Okay.
And not just women. I mean, I want to be very clear here. Everyone always thinks that machismo is, of course, against women. Man, of course, that's very easy. It's very obvious, but it's against everyone. It's also against other men, because don't we also objectify men?
Yes, of course.
When we make fun of them, when we devalue them, when we make dumb jokes about them, when...
And it goes against themselves too, because they don't connect. Deep down, they know something isn't right. But that's why you see the macho guy associated with alcohol, numbing himself, or with prostitutes. Because he can't connect in a way that allows him to be in a relationship with real connection, he has to pay.
How can he? Seriously, how does this stubborn macho guy keep it up? How can he maintain a relationship where he is loved? How can he be in all relationships? You know this. I've been following your content for a long time.
Thank you. Same to you.
And I love it when you talk about beautiful love. You know this perfectly. A healthy romantic relationship has the ability to withstand the other person's crisis and conflict. That is to say, at certain times, everyone will go through terrible moments, depressions, anxieties, conflicts, illnesses, surgeries. The other person will support you because they love you.
Of course, they don't solve things for you.
They support you. They control the fire, help you, and support you. But for the male, he's supported out of obligation, out of fear, out of terror, out of anxiety. The family is there to support an incredibly fragile system because they're afraid of what might happen. The male is supported because people are afraid of the consequences, not because he's loved.
Okay, that's very interesting. So we have a very clear profile of the male, which is someone who basically uses or imposes fear to relate to others, to be respected. He relates a lot from this place, like It's shallow, right? And he doesn't achieve that connection either with himself or with others. I mean, just to recap a bit, he's a person who's quite disconnected from sensitivity, from harmony, and so on. On the other hand, you're telling me about a boy, the one we call Princeso, whom you described as
not a postmodern man.
Not a postmodern man. This boy, how does he manage his emotions? Like a spoiled child, or how?
He manages them by constantly looking for intermediaries.
Hey!
The fundamental characteristic of a child is that a child cannot fend for himself.
All right?
He requires intermediaries to bring him closer to the world, to the material world and the world of relationships. The child raises his hand and says, please help, because I can't buy things, I can't take care of myself, I can't relate to others. And his intermediaries, preferably his parents, make it possible for him while at the same time giving him tools containing his anxiety and so on. The idea of this education model, let's say, is that you can become an adult sooner or later. But unfortunately, this postmodern non-man in this terrifying fear of embracing his masculinity has no other option. I mean, machismo isn't an option either. So he has no other option but to cancel himself out and remain childish, because that way he doesn't cause harm. So what happens to his emotions? World, help me please, I can't get a job, I can't do my duties at home. There's something very interesting that happens to the postmodern non-man, which is this convenient incompetence, right? I can't solve it, let someone else do it. I can't change a light bulb, take out a car, fix things, or handle certain tasks because I don't know how. Partner, could you? So it's curious because there's no direct aggression like in the case of the macho, right? There's no hitting, there's no mocking.
But there's a burden.
There's a burden.
And that's extremely violent over time.
Of course, the partner of the non-modern man ends up having to deal with their own issues and those of the other person. So with many women I've talked to, it's like, please, if you're not going to solve a problem for me, don't give me more. Again, there are men who cause a lot of problems, but what's interesting is that they're so sensitive, so nice sometimes, so charming, that they seem harmless. And they are. That's the problem. They don't have any drive.
They're not alpha.
The strength. Oh, I don't like standing around.
They're not leaders.
They're not strong.
They're not strong.
They're not fierce. You know what they're not? They're not gentlemen. I really want to rescue this work, and everything I'm doing is because I want to reconnect men with the values of chivalry. I want to reconnect men with the values of ethical masculinity, with masculinity based on virtue.
We're going to get to that in a moment, and I'm really looking forward to defining how we can reach that model, right? But beyond the terms, which we're still adjusting right now, right? Everyone is looking at what the terminology and glossary will be. We've already seen two very clear polarities. But in the polarity of the child, I mean, of the man who isn't postmodern, what's that name? Let's see if I end up remembering it.
Look, not a postmodern man. Let me explain quickly.
Princeso?
I'll explain quickly so you'll understand.
Okay, super good.
There was a paradigm shift some years ago for this part where postmodern philosophies took control of the academic, mental, and social collective, right? These philosophies that say there are no values, there is no truth, everything is oppression, everything is just an excuse for power to control, so everything is relative. And from there, the models of relationships started to change, right? So this non-man refers to an individual, a male who has not managed to embrace his masculinity and therefore is not an adult and mature man either. Because he let himself be carried away by postmodernity, he let himself be carried away by this whole postmodern logic where every value, every truth, and every good is cancelled out. So I have no idea what the hell I'm supposed to be. So that's the consequence of that postmodernity.
And correct me or confirm it, but feminism had an influence. Feminism, especially the radical kind we've talked about, has influenced this. And the perfect match was created, but in the worst way, from women who, in seeking equality, which we think is a very good thing,
we think it's perfect.
She ended up dominating and the other ended up being burdened. And now the woman, because I hear it in all the conversations with friends and students and so on, they tell me, Johnny, now I carry everything. My partner seems more like my son than my partner. He doesn't support me. I don't have a team and I don't know what to do. And they think, obviously, that it's just their issue, but it's not just theirs, it's cultural, it's social.
Of course, because also you said it very well a moment ago, and I want to bring it back. It's violent.
It's violent.
I mean, it seems to me that for certain men, and forgive me for saying this, but I see it in the clinic all the time and in the research that supports it, it's very convenient to cancel oneself out, because the reality is that being a man with a capital M is very exhausting, it's very heavy, it's very hard, it requires a lot of sacrifice, just like being a woman, just like being human. It requires a lot of work, a lot of wear and tear. And so, of course, it's very convenient to cancel yourself out. That is, otherwise, you have to grow up and become an adult who no longer needs mediators, Johnny. It's very convenient for... These men found it very useful, of course. It's... Carry me, please.
Mom for life?
Help.
Yes, of course.
I can't... Let's see, hey. And it's not that a man has to be able to handle everything. I think a mature and masculine man knows he can't handle everything. He knows that. Just a little while ago, coming here in one of my videos, I got a comment that says, well, let's see. And according to you, what do I have to become to be a man? In Schwarzenegger, in Bruce Willis, in Mel Gibson. And so I looked at the message, and of course, I'm going to reply, and I say, no, I'd prefer that you become yourself, that you be you, but that you be a good person, and that you can take your strengths and put them in the service of good. And that you correct and polish your flaws.
I love it.
I mean, I'm terrible at plumbing. You know what I can do, though? Pick up the phone and call a plumber to come fix my plumbing problems instead of creating more problems by trying to fix something I can't.
And either way, you're solving the problem.
And either way, I'm not asking my wife to take care of one more thing on top of the hundreds of thousands of things she already handles. You know what else I'm not good at? Fixing cars. I'm not good at manual work that requires that kind of engineering and strength. No, I'm really good at writing, I'm really good at drawing, I'm really good at giving therapy. So I put that at the service of the public, I put that at the service of people, I put that at the service of my family. That's it, it's an attitude of service.
I love it. And very intentionally, I'm kicking the ball down the road about what we're going to define as masculinity and how we can develop that kind of integration. Because first, I want to demystify a lot of things.
All right, I love it.
And among those, toxic masculinity. What's up with that?
I hate it with all my might, with that term, I hate it.
You mention it here in your chapter 1.
Yes, look, as with many things, Johnny, I think what happened here is that there was a good intention which quickly lost its way when things became polarized and radicalized. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to go off topic for a moment and then I'll come back, okay?
Perfect.
A joint photographic experts group or an MP3 is a compressed file. Do you agree?
Yes.
If I have to transmit, I have to send someone a WAV file, which is high quality audio, or a FLAC. It's never going to go through WhatsApp. It's never going to go through social media. Well, then MP3 comes up. Do you remember back then when we needed to share audio? What's an MP3A high quality file that gets compressed? And how do you compress a file? By removing parts, right?
Quality.
Yes, lowering quality by removing parts. And then when you listen to it, certain sounds seem a bit weird, right? And you can tell it's not that great, but at least you can listen to the music. I think the same thing happens with many ideas. They're complex ideas that when you have to transmit them to everyone, lose quality. It eventually turns into a corrupted file, so compressed we can't tell what it is anymore. That's what happens with masculinity.
The famous broken telephone.
I think Americans didn't have a word to refer to machismo, maybe male chauvinism, and so they came up with toxic masculinity. And it's very fitting to describe the characteristics of macho men, violent, narcissistic, hyper-individualistic, who harm the community. Perfect, but then postmodern ideologies took it and said, that's it, man is the enemy. Man is flawed by design, he's flawed from birth, he's corrupt from the moment he opens his eyes because he has toxic masculinity. And so from there, let's say another silent norm is imposed around us. Since man is flawed and defective by design, his only aspiration is not to be toxic, not to be poisonous. I mean, if a man develops masculinity, watch out, because then he's going to develop stoicism, he's going to develop competitiveness, he's going to develop authority, he's going to develop the desire to face things, he's going to develop the desire to protect. And he's going to develop less aversion to taking risks. We can't allow men to do all those things because that's what makes them bad. Toxic masculinity. And then institutions like the American Psychological Association, come out with their guide to treat boys and adult males. They say men shouldn't develop these things because it's dangerous. But that's the essence of masculinity. All those things I mentioned are the essence of masculinity. And there are even academic papers where you can find a term called benevolent sexism. To protect, to care, to provide, to have authority, to be a firm person, to be a brave person, to be a stoic person. I just described it to you and I encourage the audience to look it up, benevolent sexism. What's interesting is that in a large number of studies, look it up too, the vast majority of women prefer men who have traits of this so-called, wrongly called benevolent sexism, even the most feminist ones.
Because we're lost in translation. I mean, it's a matter of words that really confuses us now.
It's just that what they call toxic masculinity doesn't exist for me. And benevolent sexism is a very poorly chosen term. I mean, it's not true. A man who does all these tasks, is he really sexist? For me, a sexist man is someone who objectifies. He's a man who mocks, a man who attacks, a man who abuses.
Totally.
That's what's sexist, but is a man who protects you a sexist man? On what planet?
But here's a really interesting paradox, because for a long time men were taught you have to be strong, don't cry. Be a leader, be productive, blah, blah, blah. Be strong, that's what it means to be strong. But then, in order to relate to the world, you have to be vulnerable, you have to connect with your emotions, you have to be able to communicate, you have to know how to express yourself. I don't know how to do this, can you help me? Or I just can't handle everything. My team, we can delegate responsibilities. And there's a paradox, because then it's, since we're so lost in all these labels, I want to be strong, but I can't handle everything. The same happens to women. I want to feel, but I was taught not to. So how can we navigate that?
You know, the question I would ask is, in what era were men asked for all those things, and why were men asked for all those things? Here we can look for conspiracy, we can look for patriarchy, or we can be sensible and understand how human beings evolved. That is, every human being who, I mean, you, me, everyone here, everyone listening to us, we have exactly the same body as our distant ancestors from thousands of years ago. We have the same emotions, the same brain, the same intellectual capacity as our ancestors from thousands and thousands of years ago. We have a Paleolithic brain, all right? But we have evolved a lot. An animal that hasn't even been on Earth for 1 million years, not even one, because we are a young species, right? This peace and prosperity that surrounds us with everything, and wars and everything, and the disaster that apparently exists in the world, we are living in a time of prosperity and comfort like never before.
Like never before.
Of course, in this era, it's definitely important for a man to know how to communicate his emotions and to be able to show himself as vulnerable and emotional. But ask me 500 years ago, 600, 1,000, when a man was competing with everyone and you couldn't even tell your own brothers, hey, I'm sad, because even your brother could be a competitor who could destroy your resources, who could destroy your family.
Of course.
Who could kill you? I mean, let's just go back to the time of the Wild West, not even that far, the 1800s, when the law still wasn't, let's say, widespread, nor was it efficient enough to truly guarantee that no one would take your possessions and that there was a body of law that would protect them. That if you have a problem, you can call 911 or whatever number and say, hey, someone stole my goats. Who had to defend your goats? Who had to defend your daughters? Who had to defend your sons? You with your gun, because there wasn't a body of law to defend them. So back then it wasn't very convenient for you to go around showing your emotions, you know?
Anyway.
But of course now it is. The problem is that there's a fundamental rule in ethics, Johnny. Duty is always subordinate to power. If someone can't do something, how can you demand it from them? How can you turn it into a duty? Man has no language, no community, no safe place to show his emotions, but he has to do it. What happens nowadays when a man cries in front of his family?
Well, the whole system collapses.
It depends on the family.
Of course.
There may be families that welcome him and say, yes, yes, Dad.
Yes.
Yes, man, maybe. But let's be honest, there aren't many like that.
And if they do that, I tell it. And today, my dad is a very hardworking person. But at one point, he wasn't. And we, especially me, welcomed him. That seemed very noble, but it took a toll on me.
Let's see.
Because I became this archetype of the strong one, the one who carries everything, the one who solves everything. Suddenly, especially after I got married, we'll discuss how this plays out in relationships soon. Giving my partner a whole world that is very hard for me to sustain and realizing where did I end up, because that's what I learned at home.
Of course.
Because my needs weren't met, because I had a dad who at that time described himself as a scared child. My mom stands tall, I need to cover that part, to compensate for that part. I mean, you can explain it better than I can. And I said, well, from now on, it's my turn to be a man and take care of mom, and that's how I took care of my siblings, that's how I took care of my wife, and that's how I take care of everyone.
Of course.
In fact, a lot of the people who used to work with me seemed more like my kids than my colleagues, you know? I mean, I taught all of them, I mentored all of them. It's no coincidence that I'm in front of the camera with 9 million people, 9 million followers. That's my archetype, but sometimes there are crises that wake you up. And you keep recalculating, but then, like you said, that doesn't happen without taking a toll on someone. Of course not, and you have to be ready to pay the price.
Because in no universe would it ever occur to me in 2026 to tell a man not to express his emotions. Remember when I said we need to slam our fist on the table and declare it's our turn? I think it's time for men to build community, to change the way we relate to each other, to be better friends, better sons, better brothers, and that we are much more willing to create groups of men that are welcoming, that listen, that don't come in. And I mean, look, it's normal that when you get together with your friends, there will be laughter and jokes. It's our way of expressing ourselves. But sooner or later, you should be able to approach a man, a friend, and tell him, I'm afraid, why? And then talk, but talk seriously, right? If you want to make a bonfire, grill some meat, have a beer, sure, but be able to talk. And that the man's response isn't, man, toughen up, don't be a sissy, don't be a wimp, dude. I mean, that the man's response,
don't be dramatic.
That's ridiculous. That the man's response is, brother, I'm listening. I mean, I can tell a friend, I love you, bro. Me too. Look, fortunately, at this stage of my life, I've been able to build very close friendships with friends I care about a lot, and we've all been through a lot together. One of them went through cancer, another through their parents' illnesses, another through their own illnesses. Me, my own issues. How are you? To listen, see, and hug each other without needing to say things like, hey, did you see that girl? No way. How basic, man.
Yeah, like a little animal.
I mean, basic and vulgar. And so we keep waiting for the world to please come and give us that space, right? I mean, men keep waiting. Since we don't have language or space, we just keep waiting. Women should also take care of that, right?
Of course.
It's another thing that women have to take care of course. Let it be clear that was sarcasm, okay? Because everything gets taken. Everything nowadays gets taken out of context.
No, it was understood.
It was sarcasm.
Here you mention a tragic system that perpetuates something, right? And I don't know if you're talking exactly about this, but you're bringing it up and it's a reality. Look, I've worked on myself a lot, just like you. I'm far from perfect, but we're getting better. So I consider myself a man who, right now, as you describe masculinity the way you do, I'll see how many boxes I check and how many I still need to work on. But I have this sensitive side that's very developed, and the problem-solving side too. I lead, but sometimes I also let myself be led, and we'll talk about all of that. But sometimes the system makes you feel so stupid that you say, well, man, maybe I really am the weird one, the ugly duckling. And that happens in a conversation, for example, with a friend, where you say, hey, well, I'm in this situation in my relationship, and I'm trying to be faithful, and of course I see other women, but I try to be faithful. Come on, don't go against the system, they tell me. Stop acting like that because you're going to drag us all down with you. So those kinds of things, someone with a little weaker self-esteem might say, I'm messing up.
Of course.
I'm missing out on things because of the way I am. I'm not being a good man because of the way I am.
That's right.
So, it's really hard. And here I'm going to mention the programming we've had since the 1800s or even earlier. Living with programming from the 1800s. That we had to defend our sheep when we're in the most comfortable era of all. So why don't people wake up? What's happening that with so much comfort, with so many things where they can expand and not just be a part of themselves, why do people prefer to stay like this?
Because waking up is expensive, it's costly, and I'm not talking about money. Well, that too, but it's costly in terms of time, it's costly in terms of effort. Look at how much time you and I have spent talking, and we're digging deeper and deeper each time. And this is just going to be the tip of the iceberg for the men who are watching us. The men who truly want to embrace a healthy masculinity are going to have to start researching, reading, working on themselves, and doing the most painful thing of all. As Freud used to say, think, because thinking involves creating a dialectic. It means seeing yourself, seeing your mistakes, seeing your successes, and putting it all together. You also need to face what you just admitted. Not everything I do is right. I also hurt my family. In therapy, it happens to me very often. Look, just to be clear, and the fact that I hurt my family doesn't mean that's the only thing I do. Maybe I do a lot of things right, but then I find myself in therapy where people come and tell me, hey, this is happening, my wife, my kids, they're treating me this way, and I'm really conflicted. So I do some rapport work, of course, some empathy, but sooner or later, I always drop the bomb. And what do you think you might be doing to provoke that reaction? Have you thought about how you speak, what words you use, how you acted, how you let certain things slide? Oh, well, now that you mention it, look, I did this and that and this and that. So you're also setting a series of precedents that you're not seeing. It's easier to say, my wife got fed up with me, my wife got bored, my wife doesn't care about me. And I always tell people, well, your wife isn't your fan, your wife isn't your fanatic, your wife isn't your cheerleader. Your wife is the person who will confront you the most in your life. She's the person who will push you the most to see yourself.
And without even meaning to, huh?
Of course, it's purely out of love.
Purely out of love.
It's purely out of love, it's purely out of necessity, it's purely for survival. We have to be a team where you can see your flaws and I can see mine too.
And then
this thing works well, but then that's very expensive. It's easier to use MP3 as it's easier to send compressed information, where now we have social networks and we have TikTok. And so, well, you and I are also participating in that. But sending much more complex information, but it's much easier to send simple information.
And of course, and to validate, right? I deserve. TikTok tells me that I deserve. Why do you deserve it?
Or you just discard the problems, blaming them all on either the man or the woman. Do you have problems? Are you being ignored? Look how interesting that is, right? You can't find a partner, nobody pays attention to you, all the women reject you. It must be because women are jerks. No, wait, have you looked at yourself? Have you looked at yourself? There is a character who is very misunderstood, and I'm not going to say he's not conservative because he is, and he's become very radical over the years. His name is Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, the whole red pill community adores him. I don't know why, because Jordan Peterson is the farthest thing from a red pillar there is, right? The farthest. He strongly defends men's rights, but he's very different. And well, Jordan Peterson says, hey buddy, if all women reject you, the problem is you, not them.
100%.
There's something you're not doing right. And so I love that because nobody stops to think, have I worked on myself? Have I become more civilized? Have I read a little? Have I understood what women want? Women are the ones who are going to buy my product. So am I making it available to them in a way that makes them want to buy it? Now, there's also a problem here, and it needs to be said. In a world that has eliminated all forms of chivalry, in a world where a compliment is seen as a form of sexism and machismo, in a world where calling someone on the phone and asking them out is considered boldness. Now, men also don't have many ways to tell a woman, I like you. There aren't many ways left. I mean, I can't think of any. A world where you can't pay the bill, a world where you can't invite someone out, where dancing can be dangerous for different reasons. A world where being, I insist, chivalrous and gallant is a sign of oppression. It's hard to tell a woman, I like you, and it's not like men have many ways to do it.
No, look, when I met my wife at a cafe, my first intention was to go up and talk to her. A foreign woman in Cancun with the reputation Mexico has for dangers and things like that. Because of that information I carry unconsciously, I told my sister, help me get closer, you go talk to her, say something about her sneakers. Just imagine how we already have those limitations, that even though you can work around them and manipulate the system to achieve your goal, we already lose. Or rather, we live in fear. Men and women. And then we get into these paradoxes. And I don't know if I'm getting off track, I hope not. I apologize to the women. I don't mean all, just those who do this. Very specific. And I tell my female students this because they tell me, Jomi, I only attract people who want sex and casual things. I tell her, look, we can dig into your childhood wounds, but the first thing we can do is let's look at your Instagram. If your whole Instagram is pictures showing off your butt, well, men with their small minds think that when they see you, they're going to see your butt. Right? Put it in a very simple way. But if he sees that you're a woman beyond just your butt, he'll probably look for you for other reasons. But they get disappointed because they project one thing and then suddenly they're disappointed because what they attract is exactly what they project. I mean, the mirror tells them that. So, in what way can we, as men, I'm talking about, how can we get out of that? Because it's a game that both of us are feeding. I mean, women, not all, but some, there's a hypersexualization and a lot of it, and men also objectify. And I don't know, but not all of us are like that.
No.
And we're judging everyone like that. So those who want to play on that board, let them play on that board. But how do we get out of there from where you're talking about? And how can we start to do it better?
That's a good question and likely central to this matter. I'm going to explain it to you with another example which isn't directly related, but it actually is related to what you're bringing up.
Okay.
Let's go to an average gym. I mean, the fashion in a gym is totally clear. The way men dress, the way women dress. Also, depending on the body that's being shown off. In a gym, you can find people who have a very well-trained body which has taken them a lot of effort. There's a common mistake that men make, very common. You see a woman wearing a top with tight leggings, you can see her shape, you can see her body, and the man immediately thinks, I like it. That's obvious. I mean, of course you're going to like it. But the second thing the man thinks is, she's showing it to me. Therefore, she's allowing me to approach her, and that's where I stop and say, no, buddy. The woman is dressed that way for herself because it took her a lot of effort to build that body.
I like it.
It took her years to build that body, and she likes it. Why shouldn't she be able to show it? Why shouldn't she be able to flaunt it? Why shouldn't she be able to feel proud? So what I would say to the man is, first, to get out of this, the first thing is, stop thinking that everything revolves around you, buddy.
Okay.
Not every signal a woman sends has to do with you. Totally. Not every photo, not every outfit, not every gesture, not every word has to do with you. Not every word is an erotic sexualization. Sending you a signal of, I like you, I'm interested, come closer. It could just be, I'm comfortable like this. And I think it's very hard for men to understand how. I mean, she's not dressing that way because she wants to send a signal. Many times she's just sharing things that bring her a lot of joy. Many times she's simply acting in a way that makes her feel proud and happy with herself. How can a respectful man approach that in moments when the woman is much less vulnerable? Don't approach her at the gym, buddy, please. At the gym, she's there to exercise. At the gym, she's there to work. That's not a good place to approach her, right? We're in a complicated time where the codes have been broken. Look, you had to ask your sister, help me. Because honestly, even though the place was ideal, a place where you're having coffee, a drink, and so you would think we should be able to approach someone, there's fear. Men no longer know if we can. Women also don't know if they can send certain signals of openness and say, come over.
But how far does the signal of openness go? And at what point are they just alone, needing to understand their own reflection? Because we're all in favor of celebrating ourselves. We're all in favor of posting whatever we want. We're all in favor of being respected and of men not thinking everything revolves around them. But there's a part of that that's our own responsibility. Hey, like you said, if I market my product this way, they're going to want to buy it this way.
Look, I think the problem humanity is facing is a severe turbo-individualism. And indeed, yes, all of us, men and women, are turning our bodies, our feelings, our professions into things. Erich Fromm back in the 60s tried to warn us about this, and we didn't really listen. Erich Fromm has 3 wonderful books that are still being published and read to this day. They are To Have or To Be, From Having to Being, which are 2 different books, and The Art of Loving, which everyone knows. And Fromm's struggle was, listen, we are turning affection, connection, relationships, the body, the psyche, the soul into things that can be bought and sold, shown off, into products. We are selling ourselves short. That's happening to all of us human beings. We are incredibly worried about how we are perceived, consumed. We are presenting ourselves to the world as objects of consumption. And I'm not so radical as to say that the only function of sex is reproduction, because that's not true. But we have trivialized sexuality in an almost ridiculous way, where we forget that during an average orgasm, oxytocin, vasopressin, and dopamine are released, and just with that you can get hooked. I mean, this thing about casual sex,
It's never really that casual.
I'm sorry guys, it's never really that casual. And the brain doesn't understand social conventions. The brain doesn't care at all about what you think, right? The brain couldn't care less. When you release these substances, a bond is created, feelings are generated, closeness is formed. That's just about sex, which has been trivialized.
Of course.
Human behavior has been trivialized.
There's a question that many men and women ask me, which is, do you think that if the woman who in the end, well, I do think she's the one who ends up deciding whether there's going to be sex or not. If she didn't give in so quickly these days, would it still be so trivialized? I mean, it's the responsibility of both, of course. But I get asked this a lot, and there's a controversial debate on social media about it. Women, and it's women themselves who say it, let's stop, like you said, devaluing ourselves. I mean, we're giving everything away too quickly under the idea of empowerment. And the man sat down and said, well, I already have everything, so why should I make an effort? Why should I work on myself? Why should I, if I already have the reward? At least the most basic one that these guys or so-called princes are looking for, right? How so? Do you think that's having an impact or not really relevant?
I think everything is relevant. I mean, look, my cause, my subject of study is men. I want to be delicate and specific with this. I can't answer your question because I honestly don't know for sure. What I do know is what men could do about it in all those scenarios.
Okay.
To improve the situation.
I like it.
I think sexuality is wonderful. I think sexuality is precious. I think it's a gift that we are a species that can enjoy sexuality freely without restrictions simply because we desire it. It seems to me that, as with all human matters, our problem is that we are not governed by instinct. Human beings are governed by law. We are governed by law, first by our conscience and then by the laws we have established to make things more manageable. Rules of etiquette, social laws, cultural laws, legal laws.
Okay.
Because we don't enjoy obeying these instinctive impulses as much, right? They don't tell us at every moment what's right and what's not. So it's a gift to enjoy this sexuality. But the problem is that, like everything, we should understand that it has its limits, its dangers, and its costs. Depending on how you decide to relate to people sexually, you will also have consequences.
Of course.
You're going to have exchanges, you're going to have transactions. Sorry for using a commercial term, but more than economic transactions, I'm referring to emotional transactions, transactions of rights, obligations, and so on. So I think that all of us, men and women, should be much more careful about how we engage in sexual relationships. We should be much more aware of what's at stake. We should abandon radical positions. It's not possible that even today we still want to regulate sexuality through religion. It's absurd that to this day we still want to regulate sexuality through the idea of sin, through religion, purity, and virginity. Enough, can't we come up with better ways? I mean, hasn't humanism been able to fulfill its promise of having virtues and rules that help us have a much more natural, pleasant bond and relationship? A healthy one between us? I think that's where we need to step in. No, not because there's a fear of moral harm. I think that when we put it in terms of women, don't give yourselves in this way, because you're opening the door to the unhappy ones. We're opening a dangerous door of Moral stain, I mean the unhappy ones will come after you because you're degrading your values, so men perceive that you're not really worth it. Good men won't approach you. No, I don't think we should introduce a factor of sinful value or devaluation for a person who uses their sexuality freely or even in a disordered way. I think we should introduce more of a value of emotional danger, of emotional health, and help people understand that the way you relate sexually to others speaks to how you take care of yourself emotionally, physically, and mentally.
I love it.
It doesn't matter how others might perceive you or the danger in that. What matters is that you feel comfortable because you are the person you want to be.
Here comes something. Confirm it, debate it, or correct me, whatever you want. But to have this emotional and mental health and to have peace, you need to have congruence.
Ideally.
And when you say you want one thing, but your whole being leads you to another, well, there's a clash of realities. It could be the woman who says she wants a committed relationship, but all her self-marketing is, on the other hand, and she's out at the clubs until 5 in the morning. Or the man who says he wants a committed relationship, but at the first impulse of seeing a pretty girl, he's already chasing after her. And so here you mentioned the impulse. Why? And I'm going to focus on men, because that's mainly today's session. Why do men still give in to their impulses? Why is infidelity still normalized as part of the system? And why don't they recognize that there's still a greater power called consciousness, which means I feel the impulse because I'm human, but I don't have to be ruled by or obey that impulse? Quick analogy, or rather quick anecdote. I tell these two friends I want to be faithful because that's what I want.
Yes.
And if one day I want to open up, the first person I'm going to tell is my wife, like, what's up? How do we look for options? Damn, it's like I told them I was going against everything they believed in. Well, that's how I told them. They scolded me, told me to shut up. The Matrix, right? You can't wake up because you force all of us to wake up.
I really empathize with you because I'm living a very similar situation to yours. I'm married to my only girlfriend.
Wow.
I'm married to my only girlfriend. It's not that I didn't try. I tried many times, but nobody said yes except my wife. We've been married 21 years and together almost 30.
How old are you?
Almost 50.
But you don't look...
Yes, 49. In July?
Good, very good.
In July I turned 50. We've been together for a long time now. She's been my only girlfriend and my only sexual partner, and I have no interest in anything else. But you're kind of a weirdo. No, there's something peculiar here. Let me ask you a quick question to try to answer you. Think of a basic human right that you have, a human right that you have.
Freedom.
Freedom, right? It's a basic right for all human beings, right?
Yes.
What happens when someone takes away your freedom?
There's conflict.
There's conflict because they're breaking a basic right. What happens when something is a right? It's demanded. You have the right to earn a salary for a job. If I'm doing a job for you and there's a contract involved, well, even if there's a contract and you have to pay me, my right is that you pay me, your right is that I fulfill my part. Well, the moment men were told that sexuality is a right, everything went downhill. Mother? Because then we act as if our sexuality were both an obligation and a right. We relate to women as if it were their obligation to satisfy our sexual needs. I mean, there are two fundamental problems here: seeing sexuality as a right and equating all human sexual response to the male sexual response. Look, men have something wonderful. Well, there's a myth, you know? Many believe men are hormonally stable, but that's false.
I also think that's not true.
That's bullshit. Men are actually more hormonally unstable than women.
Wow. Is it not noticeable because we don't have periods?
What happens is that our sexual response is actually stable. We can be ready for sexuality and have sexual desire all the time, always.
Yes.
Generally speaking, there are times when we don't. Well, no, that's also bullshit. It's not true that men want sex all the time, but, well, quite a lot. We're more ready. Women aren't. Women go through a lot of different hormonal stages over just 28 days a month. And poor thing. Because these hormones govern her mood, her desire, her approach, and her affection. But it's very obvious. Testosterone in men is not very obvious. Look, simply put, testosterone in our case is one way in the morning and another way in the afternoon.
All right.
I mean, in the same day, we have more or less testosterone. You can feel angry, stressed, or depressed and experience having more or less of these emotions all in one day. You might want to harm someone and love another person on the same day.
Okay.
I mean, as men, our testosterone is pretty unstable.
Okay.
So it's not true that we are, but our sexual response is. So it seems like social sexuality was standardized to that of men. You have to want to be sexual all the time. Why? Because you can. And then on top of that, it became a right. This really is anachronistic. This comes from way back when we thought that's how it had to be. And these are some of the wild things that we men have done. By the way, sexuality has to be masculine. Yes, but what if we changed the game and said from now on sexuality's cultural values will be feminine? Then we'd need to learn about these hormonal cycles, their timings and cycles of desire.
Of course.
Let me turn it around. What if men and women learned from each other's sexuality? What if men...
All right.
What if we started reading books about how the female hormonal world works? And what if women started reading books about how the male hormonal world works? What if instead of competing over sexuality models, we just said, I'm interested in having that relationship with you? Let's study a little bit about the person in front of me, why they like these things and why they don't. Why has the man become so intolerant that he can't have sex? I insist because culturally we told him, it's your right. So, for example, Johnny, in a relationship, sexuality fluctuates. At the beginning of the relationship, it's one way. As it grows, it's another. And then as we get older, it changes again. And then we're not as handsome as we used to be.
Of course.
And it changes again. And then there are illnesses and surgeries and moments of sadness, and it's different again. No, you're not going to have... I mean, it's absurd to make an average of how many times a week you're going to have sex. No, it's just that the average healthy sexuality is 3 times a week. It could also be once a month or even once every 2 months, depending on what's happening in your relationship. But a man who sees sexuality as a right is going to go look for it.
Those would be the 2 extremes we talked about, the macho man and the postmodern non-man. Because they don't want the effort, they only want the reward or submission. Mom, give me the reward without the effort.
Of course.
My lollipop for crying, right? Or give me because I'm in charge, right?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Very good.
Delicious.
My popsicle for crying. I'll take it and use it.
You just put it right there? By Johnny Abraham. No, that's not true. I love it. I'm also here, creating a lot of content that we'll see later, and learning a lot, no doubt, too. So, both of them have 2 different ways, from 2 polarities, one from superiority and the other from, well, submission.
Yes, annulment.
But it seems, and we had mentioned it before, that the current times suited them perfectly. Because just like women, they're also already in that mindset of taking charge. With everything, either I give it my all or I open up sexually, but the effort doesn't matter because it's my freedom too. So, the man who we're finally going to describe now, the masculine, is there in an ambiguous way, in a sort of limbo, right?
Unfortunately, yes, because the role models were erased. That is, we know nowadays that many men don't want to be like their fathers, There is a natural tendency in humans not to want to be like their parents and grandparents.
Of course.
Or to want to be better. Currently, it often focuses on models of masculinity we want to avoid, which I understand and think is fine. So what are the healthy role models when... You're right, actually. A man happens to say, I'm faithful because I love being faithful, because I love my wife, and because the security that this faithfulness provides to my family system is priceless. Do you know Eduardo Calixto?
Yes.
My dear friend Eduardo, at some point we talked about monogamy and the brain. And this hurts a lot. It really hurts people who don't want to believe it, but do a little bit of research. It has been shown that there is a significant correlation between high intelligence, high intellectuality, and fidelity.
Being monogamous.
That is, monogamous people. Men who freely choose. which is not natural. Monogamy is not natural, but men who choose the monogamous model and stick to it tend to score higher on intelligence quotient. They tend to be more intelligent.
Because of what?
It makes sense. They're not wasting energy, time, effort, and mindset on having 400 partners. What nonsense. I mean, you've already solved one of the most complicated problems of human existence, which is having a partner. It's one of the most complicated problems. Having a partner, having a family, and having someone who will be by your side your whole life. Honestly, Johnny, it's one of the most complicated things there is, and you finally solved it. I'm going to use all my energetic, mental, physical, and intellectual resources to start cheating on my wife, to lie to her, to tell her it's not true, to be with other women. No, he's very smart. It's the smartest way to use your energy, for God's sake.
But my dearest Jorge, I'm going to tell you that just like you said, waking up is very expensive. And people don't want what's expensive, they want what's cheap, what's easy, what's fast, the reward, blah, blah, blah. Not everyone, the people who listen to us here, are here for a reason and they want the hard path. But a lot of people want the easy and cheap path, the reward without the effort. And then they say, oh damn, I didn't know that marriage was going to be like this, that I would have to communicate, that I would have to manage my stress, that I would have to learn love languages, that I would have to give in, forgive, that I would have to be faithful and resist my impulses, or rather, that I would have to control my impulses and not give in to them. Hey, this is really hard. So look, I don't want to get divorced because she cooks for me, or he supports me, or the kids. Poor kids? No. If I get divorced, it's better for them to see an unfaithful dad.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
It's better for them to see a couple suffering.
A couple fighting.
An unfaithful dad and a mom suffering, that's much more convenient.
That's why it happens. Now we'll introduce a topic I like, which you mentioned in a reel. I love the term. I call it, just like Carl Jung, a journey of self-discovery, love, marriage, the couple, and you refer to it as an emotional gym. Before we get to that, because that's where the door opens, how do you define a man? Not the distortions of man, the masculine, I know you're not going to like this, but what people would call in slang, healthy masculinity.
Ah, that's fine, I like it. No, healthy masculinity, I like it. I think masculinity is always healthy, but it's important we define it.
Love is always beautiful. If it's not love.
Exactly. It's good we describe it that way. Okay, follow me.
Okay?
You are born a man. There's nothing you can do about it. You are born a man, and as Heidegger would say, you are thrown into the world, man, and you're just there. You had no influence, you didn't choose it, you can't control it. So you start growing up dominated by hormones, neurotransmitters, your body, and so on. You develop, and then you start to acquire a personality. You don't have any say in that either. Your personality is the result of being in society, of having parents. So you start learning things, and up to that point, well, you're still a male, you're still a man, let's say. But there comes a time when you have to become an adult and you have to make the jump from childhood to entering society. And that's when character comes in, which is no longer a natural phenomenon, it's something you choose because that's where ethics come into play. You start learning values, you start learning virtues, and you start understanding which ones work best for you to get good results out there. Why honor? Why respect, courage? Why tolerance, frustration? Why are waiting, patience, and love good for building relationships? You start building your character, and then something wonderful happens. You're no longer just someone who was thrown into the world. You develop masculinity and become a man, a true man. Someone who is aware of his place in the world and chooses how he wants to relate to the world. That's a man. A mature man is someone who discovered his place in the world, chose it, and built his character based on an ethical model. So he's good. He's good for society, he's good for himself, he's good for those around him. He's not just some accident that happened and that's it, and then you grew up like a wild animal. No, 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 no. It's a choice that you've been making little by little because you've been refining, cultivating, understanding, reading, connecting with others, getting results, learning from those results. And then finally, when you're an adult, you say, oh, of course I'm a man because I built myself that way. So here I want you and the audience to understand that there are two phenomena here, a philosophical phenomenon and a biological phenomenon. Look, anyone who is born male will be a man sooner or later, period. Anyone who is born male will be a biological man sooner or later. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about an accidental phenomenon. I'm talking about a being, a way of existing. That's why I turn so much to philosophy, because it's a way to become a person, to become a man, to become valuable. And that's what masculinity is for.
And what does that look like in practice? Give me everyday examples. There's the typical one. I'm a man because I provide, or look at me, now I'm a man because I'm also sensitive. And we've already talked about these two polarities between the macho, the prince, and so on. What does masculinity look like in practice? You correct me if I'm wrong. I see it as a balanced dance between vulnerability, sensitivity, depth, emotional connection with yourself and with others, and strength, determination, logical ability. There's a lot of talk about that, and those terms, I think they're becoming a bit outdated. I don't know. That you dance between your masculine and feminine energies, yin and yang, but that you are completely integrated. Because as a human being, you have both parts, and you are taught to become only the strong and dominant part, the macho. Or not. That doesn't work anymore, because now we rule on the other extreme. You just sit there and don't make a fuss and be a good boy, right? When you integrate strength, sensitivity, and so on, for me, that's what a man is. In practice, I can be with my wife, supporting her, having deep conversations, growing as a man with her. But I can also solve problems, and I can also provide, and I can also ask for my needs without feeling less, and I can also ask for help. So what does it look like in practice, Jorge?
Well, the problem is that the model of turbo individuality we live in has convinced us that the only thing that matters here is how you feel and what hurts you, and what you're looking for and what you want. And the other person is almost an accessory. In the model I'm starting from, it's a community-based model. For me, one defines their masculinity and being a man from this model, where I realize how I impact others and how I relate to others. I discover myself through others. So I should warn you that someone who is really set in turbo individualism won't understand a word of what I'm about to say next.
The famous, "that's just how I am," doesn't work here.
That, okay? Well, masculinity is an ethical system whose function is a fierce protection, promotion, and preservation of good and life, for which it uses a series of virtues, principles, rules, and behavioral formulas. To balance what you were saying a moment ago, right? To balance your natural temperament and help you function in the world. So, for example, I have a child who is born extremely extroverted, very combative, very aggressive, very bold, right? Masculinity. What this system would do when installed in him is in fact connect him with values of sensitivity, aesthetics, vulnerability, and affection to temper all this fury, right? And make him less destructive.
I love it.
But for example, if you have a boy, a man who is very gentle, extremely sensitive, very artistic, very affectionate, maybe a little scared, masculinity, when it sets in, will be the opposite. It will tend to make him more aggressive, more competitive, stronger. And so, because there's a problem here. A man cannot protect, preserve, and promote good and life if he is harmless, and if he is too violent, he will destroy life. The only way to protect good and life is by balancing sensitivity and power, and so that has a social value.
Just as a side note and as a hack, what you're saying about balance, does it happen naturally, or do the parents need to help?
Ideally, it should be the father and mother, but even if they didn't do it, then what you have to do is become sensible and observe your interactions with your environment. You were asking me, how does it look, right? How does it look? For example, you can see it in a man who is in a family, and suddenly he gets very angry because his children didn't do what they were supposed to do. And then he gets angry, he gets furious, and he hits here with his hand, and then his children run away scared. And then his wife tells him, "You're going too far." And then he realizes that he's creating a terrible situation. And he can say, let me calm down and understand what happened. And then repair that bond, offer the necessary apologies, go to the required therapy, and take any necessary medication. Talk with your wife and tolerate being told you went too far. And then many men will say, but I have to have authority. Yes, authority, but not scaring them so much that they never want to see you again. I mean, authority doesn't mean they don't want to see you. I mean, authority isn't coming home, and how many kids go to their room to sleep because they don't want to be with their dad because they're afraid of him? No. If that's masculinity, no, of course not. That's just fear. So maybe nobody taught you, buddy, but your wife is sad every day. She's angry with you every day. She doesn't even know how to approach you anymore. Your kids are afraid of you. You get into fights with people on the street. You have road rage. You've already gotten into it with someone in another car. Sooner or later, you have to stop and say, this isn't working if I want to have healthy relationships. Sooner or later, you have to stop and say, I'm the irrational one here. So what does it look like in practice when a person becomes aware and says, I'm not getting good results? But for that, as a society, we also have to popularize the value of love, the value of connection, the value of harmony. And we need to forget about this stupid war between the sexes, where it's very easy to say that the other person is always to blame for my problems. Enough already, please. I was telling you earlier that a person with a very turbo-individualistic mindset wouldn't understand me for a simple reason. Because to incorporate this model of masculinity, you have to be able to observe the other person and let yourself be observed by them. That is, I have to be able to observe the result I'm getting here, and I have to allow myself to be observed. Which will give me the opportunity for people to tell me, Jorge, this is very aggressive. Jorge, this is very passionate. My wife usually tells me, and she's right, your greatest virtue is your worst flaw. You are a very passionate man. You are a very aggressive man. You are a very intense man. It's cool because you create, take action, never say no, and keep moving forward. But you get yourself into trouble. You get into trouble because you get angry, because you get frustrated. And suddenly, well, it's not cool. And he's right. And who's going to come and tell me, Johnny? Who's going to come and tell me that? My dead dad, my dad who died when I was 15 years old? Is my mom, who's in a nursing home with dementia, going to come and tell me? Are my siblings, who I only see every now and then, going to come and tell me, no, it would be nice if my partner, the person who invested her life with me, told me, and that I listened to her? It would also be nice if my friends told me when they notice it.
And that's the famous mirror you have to pay attention to. Because if we're already talking about parents coming with references and educational information and very outdated internal programming, which keeps repeating itself to this day, because there are a few of us men, but I hope more and more, who wake up and decide to do things differently from what they were taught and break patterns and so on. Well, in marriage, that's why it becomes so difficult. That's why my book, which is about to be released, is called Don't Get Married Without Knowing This First. And I share with you many of the experiences you're going to face, skills you need to develop, things you need to integrate into yourself, or just don't get involved and keep drifting through life, right? But, and here I get to the point I wanted to reach, the peak of all this, which is love as a journey of self-discovery, as a mirror, as an emotional gym.
Yes.
Whoever comes along, it doesn't matter if he's macho, if he's a prince, if he's a healthy man, whatever. A healthy masculinity, sorry.
Yes, yes.
To marriage,
yes.
Goes through dating, falling in love, has an amazing time, gets engaged, the ring, the honeymoon, the wedding, everything, boom. And suddenly, not everything is like they promised me. What should a man do? We're already revealing it from before. It's listening to your partner, look at your results, see how you're raising your children. But what should a man do to be able to integrate his masculinity during marriage? How do you see it there? I mean...
Well, before that, it's just that we always skip a step. I say this as a psychologist. We always skip a step. We always ask men to express their emotions, but no one who doesn't know their emotions can express them. So, the first task is to know them and recognize them. And here I want to tell you something as a psychologist. We have normalized suffering. Yes, suffering seems normal to us. Anxiety, sadness, pain, anger, discomfort, they all seem normal to us. It seems to us that it's the price we have to pay for being human beings, and especially for men. Because since our duty and role is to protect, promote, and preserve good in life, that means those emotions don't matter. I have to sacrifice myself and self-destruct in the process. Look, buddy, the first thing you have to do is pay attention to your emotions. And I'm telling you, if you're suffering, take care of yourself. Because just like no one would think it's a good idea to break a leg or an arm and keep going with a broken arm, it's also not a good idea to be suffering emotionally and think that's just how it is, just because you're a man. A person who is angry all the time is not functioning. A person who is mad all the time is not functioning. A person who is frustrated all the time is not functioning. A person who complains about everything, who is never satisfied, who has problems with everyone around them is not functioning. So the first thing I would ask men is observe yourself, because you should have much more joy, you should have much more happiness. I understand, audience and Johnny, that it's not always like that, since there are some very miserable jobs and social classes. There are very poor people, very beaten down, very hurt, for whom it's very difficult to take this pause. So I'm aware of that, and what I want to ask people is, those of us who can do it, let's do it, please. Those of us who are in a comfortable, more pleasant position, I don't like the word privileged, it bothers me, but those of us who are in a more advantageous position, let's try to pay attention to all of this, and let's try to help those who don't have this wonder, those who don't have this freedom. Right? Even those who don't have this freedom. If you're paying attention to me, I've had all kinds of people in my office, Johnny. I've had people with tremendous purchasing power, and I've had construction workers and taxi drivers.
It's not about social class, but about will and awareness.
A specialist is always available to listen. Suffering has to stop being normalized. Period. And then from that point on, the man can look at himself and say, oh damn, I have emotions. Oh damn, it's not just about being angry all the damn day. Do you know who Bill Burr is? He's a very interesting American comedian who has a fantastic movie called All That's. Recently, he released a sketch discussing male emotions, and I quote him in the book. It seems like men only have two emotions, being angry or being fine. I'm fine, so everything is. How are you fine? Or angry, right? And what about other emotions? They aren't accessible, right? Well, of course they're not accessible, so that's where we have to start. I think the second fundamental thing indeed is to normalize once again the relational world of human beings. That is, I think everything you and I are talking about here today is going to be very difficult if we keep promoting, socially and culturally, that the most important person in life is myself. Look, Johnny, if I move to a deserted island like in Castaway, do you remember the movie?
Yes.
If I end up on a deserted island and I'm the only one there, well, I'm going to do whatever works for me, however it works for me. And that's how I'm going to survive, because there's no one else to be with. But the moment another human being shows up, I'm going to have to adjust my behavior.
Of course.
It's obvious, because if there's another human being, things can't just be the way I want them to be. So turbo-individualism appeals to loneliness, and that's why we're ending up alone.
Great topic.
That's exactly why we're ending up alone, because we're staying on little deserted islands, each one of us, where I'm not interested in connecting with you, so why would I change? Why would I pay attention to how I'm affecting you? If it doesn't matter how you feel here, what matters are my emotions. You have to respect me. If it offends me, if it hurts me, if I don't like it, if I'm fed up, you have to pay attention to me. When do you ever pay attention to me in return? Oh no, we're on little deserted islands, right? And that's not how you build relationships.
That's why many authors say that to reach your full potential, and I agree with this, you need to be in a relationship or in a community.
Of course.
It leads you there because, as you noted, you observe your results. What you like, fine, follow it, make it grow exponentially, by making it grow exponentially. What you don't like is a warning, it's a mirror, it's a red flag that you need to address something there. Don't blame destiny, the cosmos, or your horoscope, please. And another thing you say, which I love and want to talk about a bit more, is loneliness. Because of hyper or turbo individualism, how is this turbo individualism made up? Because I feel that there is definitely a social factor to this selfishness and misunderstood self-love and empowerment and blah, blah, blah. Also, this stress that we have, work, home, chasing material success. And the very misunderstood belief as well that your partner comes to make your life miserable and not to reflect what you need to grow. Or what other elements would you see?
I think what's happening here, and I also want to make a note, I'm not anti-capitalist, not even by chance. I don't know what I am, man. I mean, I don't know where I am on the political spectrum. I'm not interested. I have no interest in knowing if I'm liberal, if I'm not, if I'm...
There's still labels that we don't like, right?
What happens is that it's very convenient for politics to divide us and make us fight each other in general animosities that don't really exist. So I don't know where I stand. Look, I know that the system that rules us today has perversities and mistakes. And I know that this system loves to make us feel alone, irrelevant, worried, because that sells very well. I mean, a person who has little autonomy, who has little awareness, who is afraid all the time, of course, is going to consume more of something, is going to consume more of whatever they can afford to consume. If you can afford to consume a lot, then a lot. If you can only afford a little, then just a little. But how else do we relieve all this existential terror we have nowadays? Asian communities typically, since they are community-based models, relieve existential terror within the group. One of the places with the longest lifespans on the planet is Okinawa, a place in Japan where everyone has a social role, everyone has meaning and a sense of purpose in life. Everyone has strong relationships and excellent health as they eat well and exercise regularly. So what do you think? People in Okinawa live for more than 100 years and also have a great time. But in typical Western communities, we don't have any of that. We are isolated, we're afraid, we don't believe each other, we don't trust anyone. The world is bad, the world is going to end, the world is going to be destroyed. Ecology and interpersonal relationships and politicians and wars, everyone is afraid. And in that fear, what's happening is a contraction, because it also makes sense. Our emotional spectrum works that way. Sadness and fear are emotions that contract, and it's necessary. For you to heal from grief, you have to contract. When you're very afraid, you have to protect yourself. Joy, for example, is an emotion that expands, that leads you to connect. Who is happy these days? When you talk about happiness, or when I talk about happiness, people say, oh, that doesn't exist. Who is happy these days? Everyone is worried, everyone is anxious, everyone is curious. In one of the most prosperous times on earth. Of course, because nowadays you turn on the computer, you turn on the television, and the world is a damn mess. And yet, the news that a Spanish scientist is about to discover how to cure pancreatic cancer, everyone has already forgotten about it. It's one of the best pieces of news in recent times. Pancreatic cancer is almost a death sentence, and this guy is getting closer to figuring out how to fight it. And who remembers that? No one, of course, because there are a lot of really tough things to worry about. So what's the human reaction? To isolate themselves?
Of course.
To withdraw and become very worried. Very, 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 very worried. And damn.
So is it a defense mechanism?
Yes, and I think that has worked very well for this system that sells us things we don't need. I think it's worked very well for this system to keep selling us nonsense that doesn't do us any good, and along with those sales, to divide us. I mean, I don't want it to sound like a conspiracy theory, but I do think it's good business to divide us and make us fight. I think it's good business on many levels, you know, political, ideological, commercial, that the sexes are fighting each other to the death, that people no longer trust each other, that we're no longer willing to share resources, knowledge, collective intelligence. I think that's really serious.
Really serious. It makes sense, no doubt. It's a very complicated topic, one we know something about, but not everything, and we could speculate a lot, but it's everyone's responsibility how they live their life. In the end, we do have a certain amount of freedom in this system we live in, and we have to take advantage of it, and we have a lot of awareness. Now, you talk about how the community and also in a relationship, well, it's something that leads you to feel fulfillment, joy, things like that, right?
Yes.
Isolation due to substance use or out of fear, and all this consumption that leads us, as you mentioned in your book, to alcohol, to video games, to pornography, and even to suicide. Do you think it also has to do with this model where, since there's no longer a community where we have a sense and a purpose, but instead we're hyper comfortable, so we're just floating along and feeling insignificant and without any meaning in life? Do you think there's something to that?
Great question. Of course, yes. Nowadays, the average initiation ritual for a man is getting his driver's license and his permit to drink alcohol.
Okay?
Getting drunk and wrecking the car. That's the rite of passage for most guys these days, and along with it, wild sexuality. right? That's the rite of passage. I understand that many rites of passage had to be eliminated because in this religious sense, suddenly, and in an increasingly secular society, they lose their meaning. But today, what tells a man, this is your role, this is why we need you, when, on the other hand, what society is constantly telling men in this 2026 is, you're useless, you're not needed, we don't need you anymore, you're not even good for being a dad, you're not even good for being a partner anymore. Men are expendable. How do you say it in Spanish? Disposable, dispensable. No, yeah, I'm sure that really makes men want to say, okay, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to become an adult, I'm going to become productive, I'm going to become useful to society. No, excuse me, I'd rather play video games and jerk off all day because it's more comfortable. We're missing role models, we're missing rituals, we're missing groups that tell men, first, you are needed, we need you back. Second, educate yourself and grow up and become an adult. Third, rituals that clearly tell men, you have a purpose. You don't just have to be a warrior, a hunter, and a lover. There are many other archetypes, there are many other roles, there are many other functions. Electricians are just as necessary as poets. Musicians are just as necessary as bricklayers. Soldiers are just as necessary as school teachers.
Of course.
I mean, all of them are necessary and have different skills, resources, and talents. It's not just about being a warrior or a lover. And what's the other one? Provider and hunter. I mean, look, there are many more archetypes available.
Of course.
But then my question to the world is, do we want better men? Let's also broaden the world of men a little so they can explore how they want to be and how they can be men. And let's trust him again, and please, let's help him feel if he's still needed. I mean, come on, please watch the movies, watch the plays, listen to the songs. More and more you'll realize that the character of the father, the teacher, the man is dispensable. He's the bad guy in the story. He's the villain in the story, right? And going back to this guy who asked me a while ago, what do you want for me to be like Bruce Willis? Well, part of my mind thought that wouldn't be so bad either. I mean, I was looking at a Vanity Fair photo, one of those where they put all the actors together, and I was telling my wife yesterday, oh damn, my heroes are getting old, right? Harrison Ford is really old, Bruce Willis has dementia, and Sean Connery passed away. Oh, the hyper macho Sean Connery. He was a great guy, he was a great man, not from another era, but he was a great guy. And now, who are our role models?
Bad Bunny.
No, Mom, no chinfuls, nothing against Bad Bunny from me, or maybe a lot. But, well, and don't even get me started on the whole Super Bowl thing and all that.
We went from James Bond to Bad Bunny. Didn't you compare it that way before?
Still Daniel Craig?
Yes, still.
I really liked him from... Look, Daniel Craig is an interesting James Bond. He's not so much of a womanizer. He has feelings, he has emotions, and a lot of men said he's emasculated, right? Well, he was a sensitive man who could still knock your teeth out. I mean, come on, Daniel Craig could knock your teeth out with a calm that was just astonishing. I mean, really, he was a James Bond.
Yeah, tough, more well-rounded.
Really tough.
Less gentlemanly.
But at the same time, very sad because he lost his partner.
In short.
And in a constant state of mourning in all the following movies. He spent all the following movies in mourning, breaking teeth for anyone who gets in his way, right? Hey, that's nice. We should be more like Bruce Willis. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know. But we should be less foolish. What we really should be is less dumb, less foolish, less stupid.
Who would be a reference for?
Sorry.
No, I agree. We have to wake up. It's a call to...
We have to be less rude and less sentimental. Many years ago, when I dreamed of writing this book, my older brother and I used to talk. Why does a man struggle between being sentimental and rude? Isn't there a middle ground?
Yes, I agree, and there is one.
That's good, that.
Cheers. You can tell he's passionate about the subject, and so are we. And it's true, it's true. The answer is in the middle ground, and that's the path we should be looking for.
Yes, a healthy balance.
Exactly, but we tend to go to extremes. And well, let's hope we can find balance.
But let's keep talking. You, me, all of you.
I think that at this level, hopefully, we can be pioneers. A reference, call it whatever you want, an example, or at least experiments.
Exactly, how nice.
At least. But who would you say is a reference, just like we talked about actors and so on, currently of a well-integrated masculinity?
Scott Galloway.
Who is he?
He is an American businessman.
Okay?
He is doing a lot of work on masculinity. He is a very sensible man with a very plural vision of masculinity, very well read, very well studied, and he brings very good messages for men. Look him up on the internet. His name is Scott, S-C-O-T-T, Galloway, with a G. And he himself has just released a book about masculinity. Really cool, that's worth it. Another reference is a psychologist who is making a big impact in the United States, whose name is Rob Henderson. He has a psychology model based on something he calls luxury beliefs, the luxury beliefs. And he is trying to position himself in a more middle, more centrist place.
Okay?
Outside of certain polarities, and they are two very real men.
Okay.
That we can access them and say,
But do you think people might just say they're scholars and wise people? Someone even less
close?
less studied, because let's see, note. You can't integrate your masculinity if you don't do inner work, period. If you don't develop awareness and develop tools.
I agree.
But you don't need to become a psychologist or be an expert philosopher. Who comes to mind? So that we can give a reference. Let's see, let's think, because there has to be one. If not, then we really are pioneers.
My dog's veterinarian, Dr. Solis, is a perfectly decent and upright man. He's a sensible, kind, strong man. One of our dogs passed away recently. My wife and I are really into dogs, and one of them died not long ago. A man who doesn't hesitate at all to say he's sorry, to comfort you, to give our pets dignity, to heal them when necessary, and to be there. But at the same time, he's a man who practices karate. He's a man who could give you a beating if he wanted to. One of my best friends, whose name is Jesus Leva, also practices jiu-jitsu. He could twist you up like a sock if he wanted to. But at the same time, he's a father and a husband, raising two wonderful daughters. He's a reliable, approachable man. You can go to him and he'll always have good advice. Another dear friend whose name is Thomas Strasberg.
I mean, we see them in many places.
In the back of the book, there's a section where I say, and where are the good men? Open your eyes, they're everywhere. It's just that we're not looking for them, right? Your father, grandfather, the ones we're so eager to surpass that we never sit down to ask them, hey, were you ever afraid?
Yes.
When you were young, and did anyone ever ask you if you were afraid when you got pregnant with me? We don't usually ask our parents, what did you have to sacrifice to raise us?
Totally.
We don't usually ask our grandparents, hey, when your parents died, did it hurt? Hey, and when you had to emigrate to the other side? My father, for example, who had to emigrate to the other side of the world, my Spanish father, after the Spanish Civil War, when there was no way to make a living there, he had to emigrate from Spain to here, with nothing but the clothes on his back, sleeping on the floor of a warehouse just to get a job. I don't know, it's like I would love to be able to ask him, hey Dad, were you scared? And you have no idea how much I would love to be able to show him this and tell him your last name lives on.
Wow.
Look at this amazing last name. Look, your last name is here. I would love to be able to tell him that my dad isn't here, but there are other men, there are nephews, there are friends.
I'll make the most of this moment since you've inspired me, and that includes your dad. But I was talking about my dad, about what happened, and he listens to all my episodes. And seeing how he goes through that, even though I compensate for the system in a way because it needed to survive. And then seeing how he, being an adult who could have just settled and said, I'm from another era, how he worked through all his childhood wounds. Despite being raised well and loved by his father, who says he gave him much, his father would pull out a rifle and pistol when scolding him. And my dad never laid a finger on us in his life. I mean, they were breaking patterns. That doesn't mean we're perfect, not at all. But that's when you realize that men who want to be masculine in an integrated and healthy way, or masculine per se, work on themselves. Yes, it's possible, but you have to put in effort, hard work, and discipline. So this goes out to all those who have been man enough, sensitive, and supportive so that people like us can be here.
That's right.
And those who aren't, well, they'll find out, but it's up to us to break and heal. To wrap up, one last question, and you mentioned it, but it's the one all my friends ask me all the time. Johnny, you tell me that there are good men, you tell me that true love exists. Where are the good men? So, I know we just said they could be anywhere, but if you had to tell women something so they don't lose hope, on our side, even though we're on the same team, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to learn to trust us a little more. There are some really good men, but we're men, and unfortunately men can be clumsy. We make really bad jokes. Sometimes we don't understand how the other person feels emotionally. We want to solve problems that nobody invited us to solve. We want easy solutions when maybe all the other person needs is for us to listen. We are men. Men are influenced by testosterone, by competition, by taking risks. Sometimes we're a bit like gorillas. So first we would have to define what is good. Because for me, a good man is an ethical individual, a chivalrous individual, and someone who is truly educated. The rule is very simple: associate with people who are not selfish, who are not egocentric. Women look for a series of things. A man who makes you laugh, but not because he's a clown, but because he's confident in himself and has a good sense of humor, who doesn't make fun at the expense of others. On the contrary, someone who is a good friend, who is a good son, who is a good brother. Men who actually don't say love ends in the bull ring, that it doesn't matter where you live. You live wherever, I'll come find you. A man who answers calls, who tells the truth, who doesn't deceive you, who doesn't say he's not somewhere when he really is, an honest man. Here you go. This is a question I ask women a lot, especially those who like Star Wars and those who don't like Star Wars. You're going to have to find out. I often ask, would you rather have Anakin Skywalker or Luke as a partner? And most women answer Anakin. Yeah, sure, except that Anakin killed his wife, man. I mean, Anakin strangled his wife, right? But Luke is a small man, kind of goofy, right? When I was a kid and I saw images of Luke, he looked kind of like a duck to me, you know, like a little goose. Yeah, but he's the most powerful man in the galaxy. He's the only one who could take down the Empire, redeem his father, and set everything right. He's small, he's skinny. He's a nerd. He's a little bit of a nerd. Yeah, so
I agree with you. Judging by appearance alone isn't right, though looks do matter. But you have to get to know them, take the time to see if they're consistent, if they're honest, if they have a sense of humor, if they make an effort, if they keep their promises, everything. But stop judging just by the chemistry and by how handsome they are and because...
Can I tell you something else?
Yes.
That he's protective, but because he wants to protect you, not because he's showing off.
I love it.
Do you know how you can tell a gentleman? He's a man who treats you with courtesy because it's important to you, not because he's showing off.
I love it.
You know? Not because he's putting on a performance. Those are the good men.
That's why give yourselves time to date. If you jump into someone's arms or into a relationship or get married after the second date or after a month, you're only seeing the performance, the ego, the show, the character. So give yourselves time to date because you'll realize if that person can be a real man. My dear Jorge Cantero, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
If I didn't have to record another episode, this one would turn into a 4-hour one. Thank you so much, and you'll be a recurring guest if that's okay with you.
I'm happy to. I'll cross the city to be here.
Happy. It doesn't end in bullfighting, as you said. No, it doesn't end in bullfighting. Great. Well, to the people who gave us their time, this space is for you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to keep going, to continue, to exist, and for having these conversations that help not only men, but everyone and future generations as well. If you want more about Jorge, go to his social media. How do you appear on Instagram, my friend?
Jorge Cantero.
Perfect. There you can see he offers therapy, consultations, books, everything, and I'll also leave you the link to everything I do. Books, conferences, free classes, and more in the description of this episode. See you soon. Don't forget to give it a like so more people can see it. Don't forget to subscribe so more videos reach you and you don't miss any. Jorge, we give you a round of applause and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.